In today's video, I will analyze the conversations between Jesus and those who met him in different situations. I have already mentioned how the four canonical Gospels differ from the myth of the time. The most important aspect that characterizes the Gospels is not only the miracles that close disciples of Jesus claim to have seen in the New Testament, but also the way he communicated with those people surrounding him. In the Gospels, Jesus communicated in a way that reflected the personal experiences of each individual whom he met. He gained their trust by telling them what they wanted to say in advance and letting them confess their inner feelings and their current shameful situations without fear of judgment. Because of that, unlike any myth at the time, the New Testament has become a book that reflects the personal lives of various people at the time. Jesus precisely reflects the feelings and emotions of those around him to make them understand their inner thoughts, and he explained it to them. That is why disciples of Jesus also confessed that he did not need to ask anyone anything. And in all the gospel testimonies, it is written that Jesus knew what others were thinking before anyone asked him a question. The reason why he communicated in such a way was to make them realize for themselves what kind of questions they really wanted to ask and what kind of answers they really needed to have. Because of that, each one's personality traits and religious tendencies are well described in the Gospels, not only the disciples of him, but also the opposition leaders group. Their opinions were divided over the teachings of Jesus and whether the miraculous healing power really took place or not. Here is an example from the Gospels. Let me tell you a story about three women. In the Gospels, there is a story about a woman who touched the fringe of the garment that Jesus was wearing with the conviction that she would be healed if she just touched it. And there is another story about a woman. She came to Jesus and wept without saying anything. And she began to wet his feet with her tears, washed them clean, and wiped them with her hair, and then anointed them with perfumed oil. And there is a story about a Samaritan woman who does not want to talk about her past or even about her current marital relations with her husband. Jesus did not judge them according to the law of Moses. He did not judge either the Greeks, most of whom were idol worshippers, nor the Samaritan woman who was unable to maintain marital relations with her husband. On the contrary, he vehemently criticized the hypocrisy and falsehood of the Jewish religious leaders, saying that they had led them to commit sin against God. I will talk about that in detail later. In my opinion, clear attitude of Jesus and his personality traits remain clear in the four canonical Gospels. It means that someone had been observing his behavior carefully when the whole event took place, and he remembered it, testified to it, and recorded it. As I mentioned in the previous video, the fact that the New Testament still remains up until now gives us enough evidence that the document itself is an eyewitness testimony, since his habit of speech and the way he used to talk to others, how he approached each individual differently. His actions, as shown in all accounts, reflect his internal value. Even though the story of a woman caught in adultery is not the story originally in the Gospel, the rest of the story was good enough for us to think that it contains the perspective and feelings of eyewitnesses. To understand Jesus, we must first think about what kind of fear a woman may have when she marries and divorces several times in a male-dominated society where condemnation is prevalent. To understand Jesus, we must first understand the tears of a woman who is ridiculed and cursed as a sinner on a daily basis, but in order to live day by day, has to endure all the humiliation and hardships. How difficult it could be emotionally. There was no one to speak for her. In order to understand Jesus, we first have to understand the minds of the people surrounding him. Why did they come to him? In mythology, there is no deity who understands the mind of each character that way, especially when the character plays insignificant roles in the story. Whether the miraculous healings really happened, we only have to believe it. But if we analyze the New Testament from the perspective of an eyewitness, if you compare it to mythology, whether the testimony itself is an eyewitness testimony or not, there is no question about it. The New Testament clearly shows that it is an eyewitness testimony. Of course, if you compare the different Gospels, it is true that we can see differences in the descriptions of the same scene. But this is also one of the characteristics of eyewitness testimony. Like I mentioned in the previous video, in mythology there is only one line of perspective. Considering the fact that there are multiple layers of line of each individual person cooperate with each other, and there is a main eyewitness point of view portraying Jesus as a third person in a very close range. But the eyewitness, he tried to make a distance from Jesus as much as possible, hiding his identity up until the end as a main eyewitness. But he, as an eyewitness, left many clues for us to think that who is real eyewitness, especially in Gospel of John. He knew not only Jesus, but the person whom he had close relations. Jesus taught his identity by changing between third and first person pronouns. However, it was only at the last Passover, a few hours before the crucifixion, that there was a big change. Except for one or two times, he used the first person pronoun to make it clear to his disciples that he was the Son of God and the Christ. Jesus' disciples replied that now he was speaking clearly and that they all understood now. It was right after Judas Iscariot was sent out. After he sent Judas Iscariot away from the dinner table, he used the first person singular pronoun in almost all sentences. That means Jesus would not teach unbelievers about his identity. Although there are differences in details, there are similarities in human relationships and internal values of the main character in the overall story. In particular, the reason why Judas betrayed Jesus may be easy to understand, but we cannot fully understand why he ended up his life by suicide. Just reading one gospel you cannot understand. If he really wanted to leave Jesus and work under a servant of the high priest, he should not commit suicide because his wish came true. Actually, he did not hesitate when he betrayed him and received money from the priest. His actions show the conviction of his belief that Jesus is not the Son of God or a Messiah he once dreamed of. But when he thought that Jesus might be put to death, he tried to make up for his betrayer. This means that he felt that his decision was wrong. Why? In order to understand why did Judas change his mind at the last moment, we must first understand what Jesus said to Judas in the Garden of Gethsemane. For it was there that Jesus clearly pointed out Judas' betrayer. And in Judas' point of view, even though Jesus knew that Judas was the betrayer, Jesus let him go. And Jesus shouldn't be there in the Garden of Gethsemane. But intentionally he was there waiting for Judas to come and decided to be arrested. Why? If Judas fails to arrest Jesus, Judas will be held responsible. That's why Judas went to the priest immediately after realizing that Jesus knew one of the 12 disciples had already planned to hand him over to the Jewish authority. Up until the point Judas arrived at the Garden of Gethsemane, he might have thought that Jesus didn't fully know who's going to be the betrayer. That's why Jesus let him go. But at the last moment, when Jesus said to him, Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? And Judas realized that he knew from the beginning. And after that, he said, friends, why are you here? That two words Jesus said in Gospel of Matthew, Gospel of Luke, eventually make Judas feel guilty about what he had done to Jesus and his friends. Jesus, up until the last moment, treated Judas as a friend. He already showed them miracles many times that only God could do. He even prophesied so that they could trust in him. He answered the thoughts of others, so that his disciples thought that he knew what others were thinking in their minds. And after washing the feet of all the disciples, Jesus said that one of them will betray him. It is important to note that after washing his feet, he revealed the secret of one of his own disciples who was planning to betray him. And at the same time, he said that he knew the identity of the betrayer. Then it clearly meant that he was willing to forgive Judas by washing his feet first. After showing his intention to forgive, he was troubled in his heart. And then Peter signaled to John, and John secretly asked Jesus about the identity of the traitor. But ironically, even though Jesus said that the one who received the bread was a traitor, however, after gave him bread, he commanded Judas, who received the bread, to do what he was about to do, and do it quickly. He suddenly changed his words and concealed Judas' intentions so that the other disciples would not know that Judas was a traitor. Later, he clearly confronted Judas' betrayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he said to him, "Friend, why are you here?" It was Jesus' last love and trust for Judas, but Judas walked away rather than confess his intention of a betrayer and ask for forgiveness. Jesus did everything he could do to save him, but he rejected it at the last moment. This is an excerpt from my own books. In all my books, I analyze personality of Jesus and his relationship with other people based on what they have seen, what they have said, their behavior. I analyze them carefully, and I realize that there are many signs that New Testament documents is truly eyewitness testimony. This is the end of the video. Thanks for listening.